Laura Plancarte, it's a pleasure to have you back at Raindance. How are you?
I'm very well, David. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here back in Raindance, and I'm very happy to be talking to you.
Well, third time luck at Raindance. First, we had you with Tierra Caliente in 2013, and then we had you with Siblings. I guess that was 2018. And now we have you with Non-Western for your UK premiere. Thank you so much for such a fantastic and intimate story. You accomplished to portray on the big screen a very intimate and a very visual story of rural Montana. We have a couple of questions for you, but first of all, why don't we start with yourself? Like, where are you from? Just to introduce yourself to the audience, and how did this story happen?
Well, thank you, David. Let me just, I'm trying on something here. I was born in Mexico City, and I was born and raised there. And I first worked in Mexico as a visual and plastic artist and performance artist too. And I had the opportunity to come to London to do a postgraduate degree in filmmaking, which at that moment, in a way, it was good because I was doing a lot of video art. So it was for me to be able to have the opportunity to expand my tools. But at the same time, it was different because I was used to working as an artist, not in filmmaking. And I came here with that opportunity that I got with the support of Mexico. And I fell in love with London, and I fell in love with filmmaking. So I've been living here, it's going to be almost 12 years now. And since then, I have almost not worked as a visual artist anymore. And I have completely, my main working medium has become film. So it was a radical change coming to live here. My life changed a lot, and I'm very happy. And weirdly enough, when I was, because yes, I'm a person I think that has different, have been, I think, a little bit interdisciplinary in a way to say it, because I studied architecture, not visual arts. So I studied architecture because there were no artists in my family. So I think the closest that I could do something that was artistic was architecture, but I have to say I loved it. I really liked studying architecture. I think it's a really good way to prepare you for life in many ways. But when I was studying architecture, I attended, because I have always been in love with cinema. So I attended the night courses in El Cuec, which is the University of
Mexico.
Of cinema in Mexico. I attended some nightly courses and some weekend courses. And I remember at some point I thought, well, maybe I'm going to not be a good filmmaker. So I need to leave it because it's really technical. And ironically, obviously, later when I was doing performance art and I was working with in a collaboration with artists, I realized that you don't do everything. So basically, I was a creator of the idea and the performance, and I performed and I did the design of like all of the space where the performance, the happening was going to happen, and all of those kind of things. But you realize that you work with a team.
So cinema is a teamwork. No, cinema is a teamwork, as you said, and you've been collaborating with your same team for this documentary Non-Western, right? If you're the same cinematographer I'm talking about? No? Okay.
No, I have the only person actually that has worked in the three films that I have made is actually Aldonza, who's the sound recordist. And then there's, I think she's the only person that has worked throughout the three films. And there's people that have worked in two of the films, but the cinematographer actually has been different. in all of
Okay,
in
from
all
the
of the
three
film,
film.
in all of the films.
Okay, okay, okay.
And yes, but for me, I think it's really important what you say. I think obviously making a film is collaboration,
It's
and
a
for me,
teamwork. It's a teamwork. So
exactly.
congratulations to your team, because you could tell that each single member of your crew, they committed to the story. They committed on living in rural Montana to be able to portray this wonderful story that you're presenting. Now, Laura, tell us, how did you come up with this story? How did you find these amazing characters?
Well, on my previous film, that as you well mentioned, it was in Raindance. It was in Raindance too. It was a film about immigration. That film was called Hermanos Siblings, and the one of the main characters was an American woman, who is an ex-beauty queen from Montana. She today lives in California, but she's originally from Montana. So when I was making that film, we needed to travel to Montana to film part of her roots. And for me, it was the first time I went there. I had never thought I would go to Montana. And I had heard that it was beautiful, that the landscapes, that the nature and all those kind of things. But because I grew up in Mexico City, I have always loved cities. And sometimes I have to admit that when people used to comment, oh, I really need to get out of the city because I need the nature, I would say, oh, they're so exaggerated. It's completely fine to be in the city. And when I went to Montana for the first time, remember getting out of the plane and actually really seeing this really big sky. And I understand, okay, it's not an exaggeration that they call it big sky, because obviously Mexico is beautiful and has incredible landscapes and rural places. But there's something in Montana about, yes, it's not a coincidence that they call it the big sky country. So it was very, I was like, oh my goodness, it's something, it suddenly feels that really, really, there's a peace going on, and that you are in a different kind of setting. Also, it's because it's very isolated, it's very few population, and I found it very interesting. But most of all, I think I was very interested. I found very interesting that the people were so open, because once again we come again with our own prejudice. And I thought, well, maybe if I'm Mexican and I come to Midwest America, they are not going to be very open. And it was completely the opposite. People were incredibly welcoming, and I started meeting people, and I became friends with a woman that sells medicinal oils. And we started to be in contact, and we were in contact for a year. And then I went a year afterwards, invited me, and I went to Montana and spent some time in the summer. And that's when I met Thaddeus. And I met also Ross, who is the cowboy that accompanies Thaddeus in the film. And I found him very, very intriguing. And I loved how the two men were so different, but at the same time so similar, and share all this kind of life. And both men, this was an incredible coincidence, had started dating different women at the same time. So were they just dating, and both of them were going to move in with their respective couple. And I met the women then. And for me, it's when then it got incredible. Because then if it was already interesting, then a lot of character and fiery situation came into the scene. And the women are Nancy and Jackie are both really interesting and really beautiful. And they are also I mean, we all human beings, we have different angles, and, but specifically, I think the couple that Thaddeus and Nancy make is a very unique couple, because Thaddeus is a Northern Cheyenne man, but that at 15, he needed to leave the reservation where he was born, because he was afraid that either he was end up, going to be killed, or he would end up killing somebody to defend himself. So he was able to go away from the reservation through a friend of his dad. And this friend of his dad had a white Christian family in the state of Washington, and they kind of took him in and adopted him. So for like Thaddeus, they are like his adopted parents. And Nancy, on the other side, is a white Western woman, but unfortunately, with her mom, she lived lots of experiences of domestic violence. And at one point, they were fleeing from one of her mom's partners, and it was awful. And they found a place of safety with the Lakota tribes. So the Lakota tribes took them in, and then Nancy started practicing the Lakota traditions. So in a way, Thaddeus and Nancy, being opposites or not opposite, but in different cultures that at some points could clash, but both of them have crossed over to the other one's culture.
Yeah, because they were both influenced by adopted cultures, you know?
Exactly.
And by meeting each other, they realized that brings them back to their childhood and to the system that embraced them and to the system that protected them, and somehow they feel now protected, no? And both of them, they have the desire on preserving the Native American traditions. Yes. It's in both DNA to carry on those traditions. So in your film, you tackle many aspects. You tackle about interracial couples. You tackle the fact of presenting to us Native American communities that is so alien to many of us. But from a very interesting female vision, your vision and her vision. How do you, as a woman, how do you feel about this dynamic, and what were you trying to show us from your female perspective?
Well, that's a really good question, Dave. So I think when I started at the beginning working with them, the situation of a patriarchal society was not evident. When I first met them, I first met Thaddeus, then I met Nancy. It wasn't evident. But then we did the first, let's say, I had already, gone several times with my own camera, but when we did the first period of shooting with the crew, and we spent a lot of time with them, then is when it resulted. It was a clear situation where Thaddeus is used to a very patriarchal way of living and a very patriarchal way of understanding a relationship between a man and a woman. And it wasn't my intention in the beginning. So then when I came back to London and I saw the rushes, I said, it's all over the rushes. And I said, well, I need to tell them, because Thaddeus sees himself as a very liberal man, because he left the community, he left his community and he experienced the Western world. So he sees himself different, that he doesn't have this very orthodox in that way attitudes, although he's very, as you see, everybody will see in the film, he's very wants to save the traditions. And Nancy sees herself as a feminist woman. So when I came back to London and I saw the rushes, I said, this is nothing like the way they see themselves. So I cannot do it by myself. I don't want to go back and film another period and then just act like as nothing when the elephant is so big in the room, and when people see themselves very differently to what you are capturing in the camera. So I called them and I said, we need to have a Skype. So I need to tell you something. So we got on Skype and I said to them, there's no other way that I can tell you this, but I can tell you from my perspective, or from a Western perspective, the behavior that I see between you, the dynamic of the couple is incredibly patriarchal. And you do this, Thad, and you take it, Nancy. And
how did they respond?
So Thaddeus laughed and told me, I don't care what people think about me. And Nancy was a bit worried. And I told them, something, I think things always in life are much more complex than what it seems at the first layer. So it's your choice if you want to do the film or if you don't, but this is your chance to run. and like we don't do it. But I don't want to tell you that it appears something different that it doesn't. But also, as we were talking in the beginning, you know, what's the difference between Nancy and me? So then they decided to stay, and that they wanted to make the film, and we started working together. And I think this thematic about the patriarchy was, we talked about it, and it was present throughout the whole film. And I remember at one point, Nancy told me, you need to remember that I'm not like you. You see me, because you see me as a white woman, and it's not obvious like that I'm like a native woman. And I am not Lakota by blood. I do believe in the traditions, and I take them very seriously. And I don't see the things the same way as you do. And I told her, I respect it, and that's fine. I just want you to be aware, because exactly the situation with her is because, as she says, she walks into worlds in a way. So she's this PhD professor, super successful, that she's very independent, she's very smart. And then we see her that at home, she takes on the classic archetypical role where, yes, well, you know, the man will tell her what to do and all of those kind of things. So,
but Laura, I must say, and sorry for interrupting, that you managed to portray her as she is, her different worlds, and without being judgmental, without pointing us into one direction. You're just presenting the facts, and you're presenting the fact of a free, independent woman who loves her partner and who loves the traditions, and who decides on her own will to carry on those traditions, because it's not that she is carrying with a patriarchal style in a Western society. She's preserving the traditions within a very specific culture, the Native American culture. And it's something that I must praise about this film and all of the films that we've managed to screen at Raindance, is that you're not judgmental. You just present the complexity of your characters on the big screen without framing them, without just presenting the facts. But you present the facts in such a beautiful way, because this is so cinematic. It's really entertaining, and you really transport us into the world, and that's the power of film.
Well, I appreciate, David, very much all your compliments. You're very kind, and I'm very happy that you see my work and the work of all the crew that worked on the film. And but I have to say that I think for me what was very interesting is that, and for me it's the questions that I am left with, and it's up to when or where are we talking about traditions? Are we talking about a culture? Are we talking about religion? And up to where we are finding those as pretexts, or I'm not going to say pretexts, maybe masks in a certain way to act in certain situations. Because in my perspective, I have to say that the dynamic that I see in Thaddeus and Nancy, I'm not convinced. This is my personal opinion, and each person, I think, while watching the film will have their own opinion. But for me, it not necessarily responds to wanting to preserve the traditions, because I think the Northern Cheyenne priest, you know, on the film tells them there's options, you know, where you can keep the traditions and going forward. But I think, in my perspective, that Nancy comes from seeing her mom being, it's a cycle. Her mom was, she's a victim of domestic violence, not only by Nancy's dad, but by other partners that she had later. So when Nancy was little, she grew up with that. So she was that. And unfortunately, what I think happens with human beings is that something we repeat patterns. She's used to. She's to being playing in a role where sometimes she needs to please. She has learned to be pleasing, to be able to be safe. And I think Thaddeus comes from a background and a context where he was incredibly oppressed since he was born. Lendier is not an easy place. That's why he left. And I don't think that has to not do nothing about with the Native American traditions. Native American traditions can be great, and I think can add loads of richness to life. But I think what you live in some of the reservations is because obviously the Native American society was oppressed in such a horrendous way that they suffer with many social problems in their societies, in their families, the family structure, because generations of parents were taken away from the reservation. So those parents that were taken away were abused by the system, by the Catholic Church, by lots of people, and they were abused in many ways, sexually, verbally. They beat them up in order to try to civilize them. And then some of the part of these generations were brought back into the reservation. So you can imagine with that kind of thing, how do you return? How do you return when they have, killed your people, when they have raped your people? So when you do this to people, there's effects. And Thaddeus was born with a mom actually that had been taken away into these boarding schools, had been taken away and had been abused. So he grew up in not, let's say, a stable family environment. And then, he left the reservation, wanting a better future. And the only thing that he received from the government and the response from the United States was betrayal. And I think he's a very strong man, and he's looking for a place where he's respected, where he has a place to that he feels, I belong here, I have a place, I can do, my own thing. I have a purpose in life in a way. And that's what he has been fighting for, is to have a purpose in life, but the system has betrayed him. So what happens when you are so frustrated in a way? So for me, it would be easy just to say, I think, yes, it's a matter of cultures clashing or interracial couples. And I do obviously think there's cultural clashings and things like that. I'm not saying it's all like that, but I also think what for me is more interesting, and it is about human behavior. And I think it's easy when we see it reflected on another person and we say, oh, that person, but we comment a lot, everybody can say, oh, I have a friend that, it's in a relationship that I don't think it's so convenient, or like this, or happened like that. But is this the typical example that when we're talking about a friend, in reality, we're talking about ourselves? Because I think all of us have been in a relationship where maybe we have experienced, that certain amount of abuse, or we have abused somebody, and this word abuse is powerful, is strong. And I'm not talking that in between Thaddeus and Nancy, there's, physical violence or anything like that. But I think a lot of also the dynamic is not only about cultures. I think it's human behaviors about repeating patterns. And I think it's about stories. And I think it's about finding balance that is really complicated. And I think in a lot of couples, we have struggles of power. And this is my very own personal perspective, but I think there's struggles about power and about control. And mostly, I think also it is about that. And it was very intense, and it was difficult to work, because at some points, you are witnessing all of this, and at the same time, you need to stay away from it, but at the same time, you need to be open and you need to be honest about what you feel and what you think with the people that you're working, because we are all human beings.
Absolutely.
So it was. I have to say it was very challenging. I have to say also it taught me that you do need to obviously respect. And I think Nancy at the same time. So I think it's a mix of things. I think what Nancy told me, we are different and we want different things in life. I think it's completely honest. But I also think that think that things are more complex than just cultures clashing or taking a tradition or not.
Absolutely. Humans are complex, and we are influenced by different spheres and by different frames, nationalities, culture, religion, gender. It's so much more than just a one face or one dimension. Humans are complex, right? And you, I think it's admirable how you present them as they are, and bring us something and bring them to life, bring them to the big screen, because it really is it's a genuine, interesting dynamic that we don't see elsewhere in the world. No, it is a very specific universe, the one that you're presenting.
I think it is.
I wonder, have they seen the film?
Yes. So when I arrived into having a first quote of the film, I wanted to go to Montana, and that actually we sat and we watched the film together, not only with Thaddeus and Nancy, but with the other couple, Jackie and Rose, that even though at the end they play much more like a secondary role, I filmed with them the same amount of time I filmed with Thaddeus and Nancy, but just sometimes in the edit you need to make difficult decisions in order to try to be more concrete. You have a certain amount of time, you cannot do a 4-hour film. But which was heartbreaking, but because they are very special too. But anyway, so I went there, and Frank, who's the photographer of the film, who's an incredible cinematographer, well, as you actually have seen, and he actually came with me because we were going to do also some pickup shots. So, but the main purpose of the film was to be able to sit with them and watch the film. And I wanted to do that in person, because I think if you have spent all this time, filming with them,
you owe it to them.
Yes, you owe it to them. You need to be able to sit with them and watch the film. Mm-hmm. And so we sat and we watched the film, and everybody was happy with the film, except Thaddeus. Oh. But Thaddeus wasn't. And that the part that Thaddeus wasn't happy with the film had nothing to do with the patriarchy. Thaddeus was worried because the film in that cut explored much more his background as a veteran, and he wasn't comfortable with that. So we came into an agreement, and I took out things that he wasn't comfortable. And for me, it was a shame, because I think it shows you once more how difficult he has had it, and how much he has fought to be able to achieve, to fight and achieve respect and achieve a place in life and to have a purpose in life. And what more bigger than go and fight for the United States?
And to be recognized and be part of the system.
Exactly. And but obviously the system, when people come back, they don't take care of them, and I think that's horrible. So I wanted to be able to explore this in much more detail, like we had, but he didn't want that, because obviously it's something that I think he's haunted by. And that's why I mean, what happens if you have lived? For me, the big question is, okay, you were born in Lame Deer with all the problems that Lame Deer has. Then you flee when you are 15. You make yourself, he integrated himself in a predominantly white society when he had never been in that society, which I find really, courageous, because obviously we know how people are, and I'm sure, it wasn't easy for him, and I'm sure he, experienced racism and all those kinds of things, and he fought. And he became a football star in the high school. And then what bigger thing that he could do, and it's the same country that actually, in a way, had mistreated him, he went and fought for it. And I think it has all my admiration for it. And at the end, when he came back, he was betrayed. And for me, it's like, how do you expect a man with all that to behave in many ways? So when you see him, that he's, very silent, very like that. And I don't only think it's about his native traditions. I think it's about all of the things.
It's all these layers, as we were saying. Humans are complex.
But all these layers that he's carrying, and for me, yes, it was a loss to be able to, to take that. But at the end, he needs to be in peace with. I wanted him on board with the film, and the last cut, the finished film, they haven't watched it actually yet, because we were hoping that we were going to watch it together in the cinema. So we are saving it in a way. And still we are hoping that at some point we're able to watch it in the cinema. But for me, that's the whole point. If you ask me, what do you think for me the film wants to show? And I think for me, it's that it's a circle that is not working. And it's not only it doesn't only talk about one subject, that it would be the gender roles or all of this. I think it talks about a whole kind of continent, that what happens when you enter these cycles of oppression, of abuse, what happens to people, and what is the outcome in a way. And for me, the outcome is that, for me, at the end, what I have to say is that I had always huge admiration for both Thaddeus and Nancy, because as I got to know them and live with them, I thought many times, if I had experienced the same things that they have, I don't think I would behave much worse, or I would be dead, or I would have already killed someone, if we were talking about those examples. So I admire them. And I think also one of the things that we have is the situations, because we have all these, I'm not saying that Hollywood films are, bad in any way. They have their place, we need to sometimes watch something entertaining and light. But also I think there's a situation where we sometimes confuse and we expect that life is going to be like that. And I think real heroes are people who actually, are able to overcome their circumstances. And in many ways, Thaddeus and Nancy have overcome their circumstances, because Nancy also, she comes from, sometimes people would say, well, she's white. Of course, like we have seen in the world, if you're a man, you have more opportunities than if you're a woman. And if you're a white man, you have better opportunities than if you are an indigenous man. All those kind of things play. So yes, Nancy's white, but Nancy comes from she experienced white poverty while growing up. She was homeless. Well, by the time that she was, I think, 16, she had been homeless twice. And then she experienced all these traumas with her mom and her dad and other partners of her mom. And from there, to be able to be a woman that today she's a professor with a PhD, that she teaches and gives conference in different universities, and you say, my goodness, and it's the same as Thaddeus. For Thaddeus to run sweats today, to help the veterans heal, and to fight for his traditions, and to be, alive, not killing anybody, having all these, doing the sweats in order to help the people. I think it says a lot. And I think if I had been in his circumstances, I don't think I would be doing that. And coming from circumstances of Nancy comes, I think maybe I wouldn't have been able to do that. So for me, that's the whole situation. Is obviously they are not perfect, but nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect. And I think it's great that, the way you refer about them is so beautiful in a way that I can feel, I can tell that you admire them. As you just said, you truly admire your characters. And I think it's wonderful to be able to engage in such a deep level, to take the essence and try to give us a slice of their life on the big screen, which we have all enjoyed very much so. how has the film been received in your festival circuit? You've had amazing presentations. You've been to Vision du Reel, and you've been to ITFA, among others. Where you've been with your film, and how has it been received around the world?
Well, we actually are very happy because, yes, as you said, I mean, we had the world premiere at Vision du Reel, and that was fantastic. We got very good reviews, and now, you know, obviously the film is traveling here to Raindance. Is going to be is a part of ITFA in November, and is going to be part of the Morelia Film Festival in October, and there's much more surprises coming. But one thing that it has been a surprise, and in a way a little bit worrying for me, because is that we have had an amazing acceptance in Europe, and I'm very proud that, and I'm very happy that Mexico has received the film very well, but it still hasn't had its premiere in the United States, when the film is it's an American story. And this at the beginning was a shock. And then when we started understanding that, I think in the US and in Canada, they are having a hard time because the film opens a lot of conversations, and opens deep conversations. It's not superficial conversations where you can see, oh, these ones are the good ones, these ones are the bad ones. I think right now we are living a moment of extreme polarization, using the word extreme with polarization. And I think in the US, it's very, very much in the uprise. And I have found that I think the liberal side in the US are trying, in order to fight back this huge, you know, right-wing, very nationalist kind of perspective of views, they're trying to fight back, in my perspective. In the way they're fighting is not the best, because they're censoring. And I think the moment that you start censoring something, it's a really bad sign, because independent film and art has always had that voice in order to be able to discuss and talk about things. And if we lose that voice, I think then it's very worrying. So for me, that's why it was very worrying at the beginning, because I see that we have had that kind of attitude right now. So we're still waiting to see who is going to be the brave one in the US, who will premiere it, open it in the country where actually, you know, the film, I think,
the story happens. Yeah,
the story happens.
I'm sure someone will come up with it's just being it's about being ethic and being integral and respecting art, no, and not censoring, but also understanding that we're talking about a context of the film. So it's for some programmers, it's not a matter of appreciating the art form, but it's a matter of just
politics,
tiptoeing in a fragile territory that they live in. No, it's different.
I think
well,
so.
I think we're running out of time, Laura.
Yeah.
All right. I want to thank you for such a wonderful film, and we're highly pleased to be hosting your UK premiere. For everyone listening, thank you so much for your interest on Laura Plancarte's film Non-Western. You're going to be able to enjoy it for the duration of the festival. So from the 20th October to the 7th of November at the Raindance Player. Tell your friends, the film will be here waiting for you guys for these 11 days. So do watch this space. And Laura, thank you so much again. And we'll look forward to your next film.
Thank you so much, Dave. It has been a great pleasure to always be here with you in Raindance, and I'm very grateful. And I send you a big kiss, and everybody that is watching, come watch the film. For sure, it's interesting, and come and have deep conversations. Thank you so much, Dave, and thank you, Raindance.